Hello, my name is Joshua Yeager, and this is my presentation for religious diversity in America. I put together a presentation here, and it's called "I'm So on Your Side." Earlier this year, Trump addressed a group of about 100 religious leaders before he spoke at a larger private event, a conversation about America's future with Donald Trump and Ben Carson, hosted by two faith-based organizations, United in Purpose and My Faith Votes, in which Carson is the chairman. Trump, who calls himself a tremendous believer, assured religious leaders, "I'm so on your side." The United States Supreme Court believes that free exercise of religion will be greatly impacted by taxing churches. Interference with the separation of church and state would also occur with such taxation, going as far back as the Tariff Act of 1894. With the origin of tax-exempt for public service organizations like churches, operating a charitable operation for charitable purposes without the financial benefit of individual gain related to these organizations is everything when determining the tax exemption status. This tax exemption status does include one caveat that bans churches from intervening in political campaigns monetarily or otherwise. With Donald Trump's recent executive order signing that targets this very rule, allowing religious organizations and other nonprofits from endorsing political candidates freely, whereas before they risked losing their tax-exempt status. Now this goes directly in interference with the Johnson Amendment. The Johnson Amendment is a provision of the U.S. tax code since 1954 that prohibits all nonprofit organizations from endorsing or opposing political candidates, ranging from charitable foundations to universities and churches. This amendment is named for Senator Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas, who introduced it in a preliminary draft of the law in July of 1954. Now it's interesting because even though this executive order was signed, it's almost like religious leaders are wondering what the purpose of it is anyway. While 70% of white evangelical voters told the Pew Research Center last month that Supreme Court appointments were very important in deciding who to vote for, the Johnson Amendment wasn't even on the list. The issues white evangelicals are most concerned about: terrorism, the economy, and foreign policy and immigration. In fact, only about one-third of white evangelicals, about 37%, and about half of black Protestants believe that churches should endorse candidates during elections. Overall, Americans aren't in favor of churches officially supporting one candidate, though that number has risen slightly over time. Now, efforts to repeal the Johnson Amendment have been criticized for a number of reasons. One concern is that political campaign contributions funneled through organizations would be tax-deductible for donors, and that such contributions would not be disclosed, since churches are exempt from reporting requirements required of other organizations. Under this critique, repeal would have the potential of creating a mechanism where political contributions could be made without regard to other campaign financing laws. Here's some interesting backlash that has come from some religious leaders that I find very fascinating. The Johnson Amendment is so rarely enforced that the language in the executive order about free speech is practically meaningless, said John Inazu, a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. The executive order doesn't hint that pastors should be allowed to endorse from the pulpit, said Douglas Laycock, a professor at University of Virginia Law and an expert on religious freedom. It suggests that churches should not be found guilty of implied endorsements, where secular organizations would not be. But Laycock says he doesn't hear of stories where that has happened anyway. And another quote is, "It's irrelevant, it's offensive, it's ignored by churches anyway," said Robert P. George, a Princeton University professor who was well respected in his crowd. He got enthusiasm in return for getting nothing. Take a look at some of my sources. This is where I got all of my information from. Obviously, there's a little bit of opinion added to this as well, but I hope you found this informational, and I hope that if you have any questions at all, you'll reach out to me at my Lakeland email address. Otherwise, you can always bring it up inside of the forum threads. So, thank you guys so much for watching this presentation. I hope that you found it informational, and I hope that it doesn't suck. Anyway, take it easy, guys.